Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about 7 training mistakes I made when I first started lifting, and then also what I would do differently if I was coaching my younger self today. So hopefully this will prevent you from making the same mistakes I did and will help you make better progress. So yeah, let's get started. Mistake number 1 I made was sacrificing form in order to get more reps or to use more weight. Now I was never too bad with that, but I did sometimes rush the eccentric, so the lowering part on the bench press, just in order to get more repetitions, when in reality the eccentric is probably the most muscle building part of the movement, so you should really always go slow and controlled on the way down. I would also cut the range of motion short on my squats and leg presses, and was probably using more weight after the first 3 years of lifting than I'm using now. But again, research shows that performing larger ranges of motion is better for building muscle, because you otherwise miss the part of the movement where your muscle is getting stretched, which again is great for hypertrophy, so for building muscle. So with the knowledge that I have today, I would just advise my younger self to leave the ego at the door and to focus on performing each rep with a full range of motion with a nice and controlled eccentric, and not to focus too much on the weight and repetitions that I'm able to perform. Mistake number 2 was doing a body part split, which is sometimes also called a bro split. So this is where you only train one muscle group a week and then give it a full week to recover, which is basically how pro bodybuilders train. So I think on Monday I would do chest, then on Tuesday I would train my back, Wednesday I would normally rest, on Thursday I would train my legs, and then on Friday I would train my shoulders and arms. And the reasoning behind that type of training is that you want to provide the biggest stimulus possible to that muscle group and then give it a full week to recover. Now I don't really think that's a totally wrong way of doing things, and it obviously works really well for a lot of bodybuilders, even those that compete in drug tested shows. And training frequency, so how often you train a muscle group per week, doesn't really seem to play an independent role on muscle growth. However, I do think there's one major problem with training that way, and that is that your training quality will definitely go down towards the end of your workout, as your muscles will be really fatigued towards the end. Remember, like I said in my last video, the goal of training is to provide an overload stimulus, and so you want to set up your training in a way that allows you to perform your volume with the highest quality possible. So let's say you're training your chest and you've figured out that you need 10 sets per week to progress. If you were doing a body part split, then by the end of those 10 sets, your pectoral muscles would be so fatigued that you could use a lot less weight than you normally could. And by doing that, you would provide less tension to the muscles, which is what actually stimulates muscle growth. And so a better way of doing things would be to do 5 sets on Monday and then another 5 sets on Thursday. And the quality of that would probably be a lot higher than if you did 10 sets all in one session. So instead of doing a body part split, you could do an upper lower split, where you would train your upper body twice a week and your lower body twice a week, which also has the added benefit for beginners that it lets them improve their technique a lot more because they get more practice. Mistake number 3 I made was taking every set to failure. Now, the way I used to train was I would take every set to muscular failure, which meant I would actually do reps until I couldn't move the weight at all anymore. And I can remember on a couple of occasions where I had to be rescued on the bench press and on the incline bench press because I hadn't asked anyone to spot me, and I could literally not move the weight at all anymore, and the bar was stuck on my chest. So someone had to come and yank the bar off my chest and save me from not dying or choking to death on the bar. Especially for a beginner, training to failure is necessary, and you'll make just as much progress if you leave a couple of repetitions left in the tank. So your main focus should be on mastering your technique and then slowly building the intensity once you've mastered the basics. What you could do is take the last set of every exercise to failure and only do that on exercises where it's safe to do so. So no one has to come and rescue you on the bench press like they did with me. If you take every set to failure, that can negatively impact your training volume, as your training performance will drop off pretty quickly, and it can also mean that you'll need longer to recover between sessions. And I think one more important point is that if you're always redlining your body, you'll probably have a higher chance of injuring yourself as well. However, I don't think training in that way was completely wrong, as it did teach me to push myself very hard. And I think a lot of beginners actually have the opposite problem, where they don't push themselves hard enough, and that's why they're not seeing any progress. So like I said before, maybe keep training to failure for your last set, and then also do it on exercises where it isn't risky to do so. Mistake number 4 I made was maxing out every session. So I don't think I did this at first, but after the first year or so, I would max out on either the bench press or the deadlift pretty much every time I got to the gym. Now, you will get better at performing a single 1RM, but it's a pretty ineffective way of building muscle. So I'd say if your goal is to build size and strength, you should do most of your sets in the 5 to 10 rep range, and then maybe test your 1RM every 6 to 8 weeks. For me, I never really had any aspirations of doing a powerlifting meet, so maxing out was pretty pointless anyway, and the only reason I really did it was probably to look cool in front of my friends. So if I'd advise my younger self, I would say stay away from maxing out. It provides you with less muscle growth and probably a higher chance of injury as well. The next mistake I made was chasing muscle soreness and using it as a measuring stick for if a workout was successful or not. I can remember waking up in the morning and being really disappointed if the muscle group that I'd trained the day prior wasn't super sore. However, soreness doesn't necessarily indicate if your workout was successful or not, and being sore is often a result of providing a novel stimulus to your body that it isn't used to yet. For instance, if I jumped up and down the stairs 500 times today, then my legs would probably be pretty sore tomorrow. But I think we can all agree that it's probably not the best thing to do if you want to grow strength and muscle. Instead, you should focus on progressively overloading your muscles like we talked about in last video. So if your training is set up in the correct way, then over time you should see improvements in your performance. So adding reps or adding weight. And if that is happening, then you probably don't have to worry about being sore too much. And being too sore can actually be a negative thing if it interferes with your subsequent training sessions. With all that being said, I think some degree of soreness after a workout is probably a good thing, and you get more sore from doing a controlled eccentric and from performing exercises with a big stretch component, like for instance an RDL. And both of those things aren't just correlated with muscle soreness, but also with muscle growth. So probably some degree of soreness is probably advisable. And soreness can also be a useful proxy to know if you hit the muscle group that you are actually trying to train. So let's say you did a lat pull down and the next day you wake up and your biceps are really sore, but you don't feel anything in your lats, then that's probably a sign that there's something with your technique that needs to be fixed to target the lats a little bit more. So in summary, I don't think soreness should be avoided, but just think of it as a possible byproduct rather than a necessity. Mistake number 6 I made was thinking that cardio will kill my gains. When I started lifting, I was super skinny and I wanted to build a muscular physique in the quickest time possible. So I read that in order to build muscle, you need to be in a calorie surplus. And because cardio burns energy and doesn't really have a muscle building effect, I was super worried that doing any type of cardio would completely prevent me from building any muscle. And so what I would do is I would basically avoid doing any kind of physical activity outside of the gym. One funny story that I can remember is that in high school, we would have to do an endurance test in our physical education class. And you would either have to run or swim for 12 minutes. And depending on the distance that you covered in that time, you would get a better or worse grade. So I've always been a really good runner, but a pretty mediocre swimmer. But because I didn't want to sweat too much, because I thought this will result in me burning all those calories and losing all my hard-earned gains, I actually took the swim test and ended up getting a worse grade than I would have if I would have just taken the running test instead. It sounds absolutely ridiculous, and it definitely is. Doing some kind of cardio is great for your heart health, and if it's not done excessively, it will not result in you losing any muscle. If anything, it might even improve your performance by making sure that you recover quicker between sessions. The last big mistake I made was looking for the perfect plan. And I think that's a big one for beginners. I see it all the time at the gym that I train at, with people thinking there's some kind of magic bullet out there, that if they find a perfect plan, it will all of a sudden result in them making double the progress that they're currently making. And I can remember spending hours planning my workouts, trying to optimize my training, whether that be the perfect exercise, the perfect rep range, or the perfect training plan. And while it's definitely a good thing to try and improve your training, the problem was that I would change my program nearly every week, which makes it literally impossible to know what is actually working and if you're actually making progress or not. Instead, I should have just focused on sticking to a routine for 6 to 8 weeks, focusing on progressive overload, and then assess at the end of those 6 to 8 weeks if I've made progress or not. And if not, then just change one training variable, for instance, add a set, maybe change an exercise or change a repetition range. Now, with all that being said, I do think I did manage to get the main things right, which was I trained very consistently and I trained with a lot of effort. And then I also slept enough and ate enough. So all in all, I still did make some good progress. So if you aren't doing these things already, so you're not training consistently and you're not training hard enough, then you definitely need to make these things a priority first before worrying about any of the other stuff. And if you need help with setting up a training program, just go and check out my video on that, where I go through a step-by-step procedure on how to design your own training program. So that brings us to the end of this video. Make sure you like this video if this was helpful for you. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.